Hello, everybody, and welcome to Bright Bull's online community stories series. And this is an online version where we are interviewing thought leaders, entrepreneurs, and inspiring individuals that are running, building, and growing communities, especially within the B2B media and events industry. And we really like to share and dissect how these kind of inspiring individuals are building these interesting and exciting communities and monetizing those communities in various different ways. For episode 4, I'm very excited to welcome Simon Corbett, who's the founder and CEO of Global Dating Insights, as well as the founder and CEO of Jargon PR, a very, very successful PR agency. And interestingly enough, Simon and his business on Jargon have been in the news very recently because they're essentially going places. So, and the story that Simon's going to share with us today is how he build a community of 30,000 people per month visiting their website from scratch. So I'm really hoping to for Simon to share a lot of his kind of interesting information about how he's done it, what were the kind of winning stories, horror stories, and hoping that that's going to be very useful for you if building communities is something that you're going to be working on moving forward. So without further ado, Simon, how are you? Welcome.
Thank you. I'm very well, thank you, and pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Excited. So, Simon, do you want to just give us a little bit of an introduction about yourself or about Global Dating Insights, and then we can start from there and hearing the story. How did it all start?
Yeah, sure, no problem. So I've been in PR, been in public relations for around 20 years. I did 10 years at the big agencies in London and then started my own about 10 years ago. And Jargon PR today, we do a little over 2 million a year in fees. We've got around 40 clients. We've got 20 people in the team, and it's a really good, solid, growing agency. We have a second business called Global Dating Insights, which started 8 years ago and which, as you said, is focused on the online dating industry and has got quite a strong community. And it started around 8 years ago. We had an online dating client at the PR agency, and we started getting interested in that industry and realized there wasn't really any trade media in that market, and no one was really doing conferences or events, or certainly not very well. And we thought there's an opportunity here. My background in PR, I know media and conferences and events very well, although I must admit I didn't know a lot about the online dating industry, and that was where it all began.
That's kind of interesting. So what we're hearing is that, like, you receive this client in the dating industry. Very likely, we also in the events industry start doing some research. Okay, let's see who are the key partners that we are going to be able to amplify the message for our event. So you found that there was basically an evident gap, and then suddenly, and then that's kind of how it all started. So tell us the story about, like, so idea, bingo, this is what we're going to do, and how did it all begin? Tell us the steps that you've went through on that process.
So had the idea was the first thing, and then just began looking into it. And I don't know if you remember, online dating about 9 or 10 years ago had a horrible stigma. It was all a bit naff, and it just wasn't cool. And we came into the industry at the time, it was sort of getting cooler, and people were meeting online, and it was quite socially acceptable, certainly in London anyway, to talk about that. So we began looking and researching all the big online dating companies internationally and the sort of media coverage they were getting and events they were speaking at. And as I said, there was nothing particularly for the industry. So set up a website, came up with a name, Global Dating Insights, registered some domains, got a WordPress site going, and invested in an editor, so a full-time journalist, to begin writing copy. So that was where it started, and we wanted to lead with value, lead with content, lead with material and news that I would want to read if I was in the industry, whether it was fraud, scamming, monetization, payment processing. What do people that work in these big online dating businesses need to know and want to know? So that was where we started.
So you've basically decided, okay, we're going to go in with content-based approach.
Right.
Let's not complicate matters. Let's just get the domains, just get the website up and running as quick as possible, and let's just let's start putting content out there. So pretty much top of the funnel scenario community, where you're like, let's just make sure that we get enough coverage around certain areas, around certain topics, around that. Did you conceive, or did you know that Global Dating Insights was going to have events, that they were going to have webinars or anything like that? Or how was that process at that point in time?
So how we were going to make money was always an obvious and big question, and conferences were always, top of mind. But we didn't realize quite when and where and how and what geographies, and I didn't really know. I had the idea, but there wasn't any meat on the bones, to be honest. So we got going, and then after a few months, we started to build up relationships with all of the big online dating companies and all of the big suppliers to the industry, and we were doing news and interviews, and it was great. Webinars we weren't doing a lot of those back then at the start, and we weren't doing podcasts or the virtual events that are now commonplace. So we started with just sort of written content, and then we had the idea of putting on our first conference in London, and that was in September, and we'd started around 6 months earlier. And we looked at some venues, some very nice 5-star venues, reached out to the dating companies and said, would you like to come and speak? And the agenda pulled itself together. And then we put some tickets on sale. And before we knew it, we'd kind of sold 150 tickets. We'd sold out the place. And then sponsors began to follow very quickly after.
Right. So it's very interesting. So it seems that everything started pretty much organically. So you start putting content out there. You started basically. Did you have a sales team in house, or was that kind of part of the role of the editorial person, or were you doing sales?
I was doing sales. So we had one full-time editor. So he wrote the copy, he wrote the articles, he did the interviews with the CEOs, the executives of dating companies, and he did all that. I looked after the money. And that basically involved finding sponsors for the conference. And we were very lucky because I guess 2 things. The first is that they liked our content. They wanted to engage with us and talk to us, and they knew we were turning out good material. And the second thing was there wasn't really anyone else of what I would consider quality in the market.
Right.
There were some bits, but it wasn't where it needed to be for an industry of this size. So they were the 2 things that really went in our favor as we started.
So I think that's kind of a very good position, because essentially, so if you're putting out content, people are kind of say from both sides, end users as well as potential sponsors or technology or vendors in the space, get that attention that, okay, these guys are doing something interesting. Then you plug in that kind of collaborative environment where they're kind of letting you know what is it that they need, or what is it that they want to see from both ends, and then you have that ability and that agility to start kind of creating that. That's pretty interesting. So if you were kind of talking to another, let's say an event organizer that is looking and thinking about building a community, especially with the characteristics of yours, top of the funnel, what would you say, again, would be the first steps? Again, obviously getting the editorial content, but what would be kind of the KPIs or milestones at that point in time, especially when you're focusing on adding value first?
I'd say the first thing is niche. So find a community, find something unique. It's the more niche, the more unique, the better and the easier in my mind. Secondly, make sure you've got something differentiated to offer. So if you're just doing the same stuff other people are doing, it might be different. Whereas if you can find a unique angle or a unique twist or a different way of presenting things. And we did that with our conferences. We have the way we structure the days, we have a lot of very short presentations. So we have quite a number of smaller 10 or 15-minute ones, and then a break in an hour. So when everyone else does sort of 30, 40-minute chunky stuff, we do quick, short, sharp. And so what that means is if you're sitting there in the audience and there's something you're not interested in, it's over pretty quickly. And equally, it means there's a lot more speakers, there's a lot more diversity, there's a lot more topics and content you can cover. And I think as long as it's broken up every hour with time for a coffee and some networking, that it's a different format to what most organisers do. So that was how we looked at it in terms of niches and differentiation. And in terms of your question about KPIs, I would say for us, we looked at engagement on the website, we looked at traffic, we looked at visitors. Are we putting out stuff that people want to read was really the start. And then are those numbers growing? Are the more people signing up for the newsletter? Are the social channels getting more populated? Is the average time on the website increasing? And we didn't really have any numbers of what success looked like. It wasn't people need to be on for 3 minutes and 20 seconds or anything. We just knew we wanted them to increase and keep going. So that was how we looked at it.
Right. So let's say, like, what would you say, obviously 8 years after, what would you say is in a B2B environment, when you start putting content out there, what would you suggest would be the first milestone in terms of, let's say, visits or traffic to a niche B2B website that's kind of putting content out there?
So I guess we started off with 1,000. That seemed a good number. Can we get 1,000 people on the LinkedIn group, on the social channels, following us, with us, and visit the website? So that was where we started. You've got to start somewhere. Let's pick that number to start with. And that, bearing in mind the size of the industry and the spread internationally and the different types of people in the market, from those that handle payment processing or fraud or marketing, there's a good number. It's worth about 9 billion a year as a category, as a vertical data. And although a lot of the companies own a number of brands, so there's a lot of brands in the industry, but there aren't that many companies. 1,000 felt like a good place to start, so we started there. That was it.
So you started there, and how did it all go to 30,000?
It just kept growing, to be honest, and our line literally kind of kept ticking up like that until a point now where it's kind of flatlined and plateaued, and there's only so many people in the industry, so we've pretty much got everyone, and anyone new that comes into it gets recommended us straight away by people they know.
I think that's a kind of, because to be honest, in many B2B areas, and when they are very, very niche, I think a 10,000 visitor a month is a decent size. And then so we would figure as well that, like, when you're growing into a 30,000, and if it kind of plateaus and everything, then obviously, as you highlighted, okay, we feel that we've got the market covered. I'm curious to understand if, while the numbers were growing, did you intend to write more content? If you were putting one article a day, or or were you guys at any point in time saying, okay, we need to put more articles or grow the editorial team? How did you kind of navigate that side of things?
Yes, we definitely did. So we started off with one good article a day, and that was that. Again, we had to start somewhere, so let's start with one. And then we said, let's double it and do a couple. And our editor responded very well to that. We then took on another member of staff as well, and we got to 4, and then five good articles a day. Now, what happened is there's only so much news in dating. There's only so many new products, new brands, new services. There's only so much in the industry. So what we found was there wasn't really an ability to go beyond that. There's just only so much stuff that happens. And so that was kind of the level we stayed at. And then what we realized was we wanted to add new streams of content, such as the past, such as the virtual networking events, such as the special reports, and all the other bits that are now on Global Dating Insights. So we realised it wasn't volume of content; it was depth of content and positioning in different ways.
Right, because again, now that we're talking about top of the funnel content, so you're getting the traffic in the levels that you want, you increasing the volume, therefore, then you're getting the traffic that's required. Moving a little bit down in the funnel, then you're having subscriptions to your newsletter. That's kind of pretty, I guess, pretty standard across everywhere, across the industry. And then you're just then looking at what other types of content can be created, right? And I suppose that's kind of where you're having that kind of one-to-one collaboration, understanding and tapping into your audience as to what else is it that they're looking to achieve. And so right now, what is your let's say, what is Global Dating Insights product portfolio again? And the angle that I am asking this question is, so you've reached certain level of growth, certain level top of the funnel, then you need to start then trying to monetize that community. So how are you currently monetizing that community for the benefit of the business?
So the community is entirely monetized through our conferences and events, and we do 4 a year. We do Singapore, London, LA, and New York, and we've been doing these for a number of years now. Although, of course, we've kind of paused for the past year for obvious. Those events. Great. So they're typically 2-day events. So it's a Wednesday night drinks party, and we'll hire a bar. Thursday, a day of conference presentations, roundtables, networking, all the usual stuff, and then a Thursday night party. And we sell tickets to the events in the 4 locations. Those tickets sell out very quickly. Normally, we typically have 150 to 200 people, depending on the locations. They're all 5-star venues, so we do the Marina Bay Sands in Singapore, we do Shanghai, Monaco and LA, and etc. And we sell out of those very quickly. And of course, you get the C-level execs and the board of directors and all the senior guys from Matches and Bumble and all the all the big. If they're there, the sponsors want to come. The guys that are selling into the industry, they need to be there and they want to be there. So we have a small number of sponsors, and that's the monetization strategy.
Right, and tell us a little bit more about the other side. So you have the content partners on your website, and the how do you? Is there an interest of monetizing that engagement on a monthly basis of the people that come and go into the website?
Sure. So we had, as you say, we have content partners as well. So there's around 12 companies that we call content partners, and they have their own dedicated and branded area on Global Dating Insights.
Okay.
In those areas, they can put their own content. So if they've got some new case studies or some new white papers or anything like that, they can add it in. So we sell that for an annual fee. That's payable annually in advance, and content partners put material in those areas, and that also works very well.
Right. So an interesting side of things is when B2B publishers or event organizers that have like a community that is open. First of all, it's an open community at the very beginning, because to clarify that, no, the end users don't have to pay anything to consume the content on your website, right?
That's correct.
So the only way, at the point under which you're transacting information with them, when they sign up to the newsletter or when they signed up to any of the downloadable pieces, then that's where you collect your data that would allow you to communicate with them and of course gain the insight. Is that right?
Correct. That's it. You've got it.
Fine. So with that sponsored pages, I mean, many companies do this. I think one of the challenges that they've encountered is that the sponsors don't put content, or they know that they can put content out there, but then some might be very diligent in what they do, some won't. How do you deal with that?
So another stream of monetization for us is then helping these content partners with their content. because
Right.
exactly as you said, some of them might not have new white papers or new case studies or press releases or podcasts or something like that. Some of them might be very cool technology businesses, but they're not big on the marketing. So then what we can do is we can then offer to help them with that, and it's in the content partner area, so it's quite salesy material, and
Right.
we're not pretending it's news for the main
Right.
meeting. And of course, for the content partners, it's great because they know that we know the industry, we understand it, we can write, we employ a team of journalists, that's what we do, and all this material together for them very efficiently and effectively. They get great content and material on global dating insights, and of course they can use that in all their other channels on their website or their social media or for customers or blogs and all that other good stuff. So we do a lot of that, and that works very well as well for us.
So that works very well, and I'm assuming that, like, if you've also, through your marketing engine, will push and drive content towards certain relevant pages, so that again meet certain criteria for the sponsors, right, or the
Absolutely.
content partners.
Yeah, absolutely. That's it. So we'll
Okay.
put we do Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday newsletters to our community. We've got about 7,000-8,000 people on the database, and they'll get that. And within the newsletter, there'll be bits from content partners in there, new content, new material. So that helps those guys immeasurably.
That's pretty interesting. Interesting you say that you send a Sunday newsletter. In the industry, there's some people saying, bah, B2B Sunday, people are just busy. Why send in some information on a Sunday?
A couple of reasons, really. So the first is on a Sunday, you're not at work, of course, you're at home, but people do still check emails and check their phone and check to see what comes up. I'm sure we all glance at things on a Sunday. And Sundays, you've got a bit more time. There aren't 100 emails coming in every hour. There aren't Zoom calls and meetings and all the rest of it. So the shoulders are down. You probably just read things a little bit more. And so we found a Sunday email is very effective in terms of open rates and readership and click-throughs and all of this good stuff. Also, the Sunday newsletter for us is a bit of a roundup of all of the week's stories. So if you haven't been on the website because you've had a busy week and you haven't had a chance, it's a great way of just flicking through, getting the headlines, catching up, and visiting anything you may have missed. So that works really well for us.
That's a good one, Simon. There is another element that we have that I've seen on your site and that we've discussed before, which is the Power Book, which is essentially, I mean, I'll let you tell about what the Power Book is, but it's kind of another way of getting exposure in the industry, or being seen, or creating that link within the industry. Like, we have to look at this Power Book every year. You publish every week. So tell us about the Power Book as a tactical approach to serve your audience, to suppose obviously monetization aspects as well. Tell us more about it.
Sure. So when we first started the business, we knew the brands, of course, the bigger brands, Match or Plenty of Fish, or who are the really big brands. But we didn't really know who the big people were. Who are the most important ones? Who are the real heavy hitters in the industry? So as part of launching the business, we began researching this and putting together lists. And the idea really came together for that. We came up with a list of all of the big names in the industry. And then we went, well, who are the main ones? Who are the women at the real top and the men at the real top? And we then sort of kind of called it the power list. And we just thought, well, if we don't know this, I bet other people don't know it too. So on Valentine's Day, on the 14th of February every year for the past 8 years or so, we've released the GDI Power Book. So this is a list of the top 30 most influential people in the industry. Now, it's important to say that how we define influence isn't just by money. You're not influential just because you've got a lot of money or you work for a big brand. You're influential for a number of reasons. And so we've got a number of criteria we go through: economic, social, and a range of others that we look at. And we try and pick the kind of the top 30 people. And that's internationally. So it could be sites for gay men are now legal in India, and they weren't legal for a while. And some people that are pushing that legislation through and changing that are, of course, very influential because
of course.
There's a lot of influence. So that's a good example of the sort of person that's been influential in the industry. And we've then kind of done that every year ever since on Valentine's Day. And of course, people want to be in it, of course. So there's quite a lot of talkability and word of mouth, and then a lot of interest. And with interest comes sponsors who would like to take an advert and some content in it.
Yeah, that's kind of very, very, very good and very interesting. And this is something that we evangelize strongly. And because right now, there is a trend for to develop micro communities, and where there's more value, more niche, more unique, even within your niche. But then there's still value in having and reaching what we call a top of the funnel community, and to create conversion and engagement opportunities with the brand with the brand itself, but the brands that organizations serve. And then I think you having that breadth of various items then is testament that creating various content opportunities, various engagement opportunities for both audiences as well as sponsors, it pays off, and it's kind of really well worth it. I wanted to understand and touch upon a little bit on the obviously last year, and did it change in any way the way that you run Global Dating Insights before and the way that you run now the Global Dating Insights now? How has the pandemic affected or benefited you in any way?
Sure. Well, let me start with the obvious stuff. It's affected us because, of course, we can't run big conferences and events globally. So that's obviously difficult. But what it's done is it's opened up new opportunities, and we've been doing a number of virtual events. So we call them Final Fridays. So basically on the final Friday of every month, we have this very cool online platform, and people can come on and sit on tables and network and mingle and move around. And that's very cool. So we've been doing that, but we're very keen to get back to the conferences and events, and it's early July now. We've actually announced our schedule of events for all of next year, all of 2020, and we've had a lot of interest in that already. So it's definitely affected us, but we feel we're through it. We feel that some of the virtual products we've done in the interim have worked well, and we're looking forward to getting back to how things used to be. And from announcing the dates, demand for tickets and speakers and sponsors has been off the chart. So we're very confident that
that's very good.
Come with us.
Congratulations on that. The reason why I like to, in most cases, emphasize that is because I think that you obviously entered into the pandemic already with some very good track record, very good list of products, very good list of content opportunities to engage with your audience. So probably, the pandemic just kind of withdraws the element of the physical event, and essentially you don't have like a very kind of massive digital pivot strategy, because you already were digital first in the first place, right? So pardon the pun. But many event organizers are now building what you have built over the last 8 years, and that's kind of why I think it's important and being so specific in trying to get so much of this data. Now, so when you are now getting over the next 3 years, what do you have as a big plans, or is there anything in particular that you're looking forward, or that have in your business plan different to what you're doing already?
Sure. I guess probably the main thing is other conferences and events. So we do, London for the European market, we do Singapore for Asia Pacific, and then we do LA and New York for the American market. We're very keen to push into India. That's an exciting market and a very big market where dating is growing very quickly. We can't go there at the moment, of course, because of COVID reasons, but there's appetite to go there. The Chinese market as well is growing very, very quickly, and there's so many brands over there, and of course culturally things work slightly differently as they do in India as well. But we feel there's a lot of opportunity in these markets. So expansion through growth of conferences is the first thing, and I think in expansion through services is probably another, where we're quite often being asked to help with content, for example, for different companies in the industry. So potentially looking to add something like that. But I think at the moment, conferences are, more events is the next step. We're very good at them. We put on a very good show. It's very professional. We have a great team that organise it with us, and it's 5-star venues. And I think if we continue to push that further into other geographies, that would be well received.
Yeah, because actually that was kind of one of the questions that came through, which was, how are you placing growth, and how is Global Data and Insight scaling? And which you've already answered the question. Your version, the way in which you're attempting to scale is by basically creating more location of events in the markets that are obviously growing, which is kind of a good, obviously a good kind of strategy in that front. And
just to add, I think what's behind that is people and is users. So our culture in the West, in London, is of course different to other markets, and you've only got to look at some of the dating services that have grown. So Bumble, for example, is female first. Well, in Australia or the US or the UK, that's very socially acceptable and very cool, and that's great. Other markets and cultures and countries, that doesn't quite translate the same. So there's lots of local variances internationally, and understanding those is very important. So brands and sponsors and suppliers to those companies need to understand how things work in those markets to supply them. So we're not sort of doing the same thing, but lots of places,
of course,
even though it's the same format of conference, content and what we're talking about and the angles we're talking about, it's very different in China to how it is in London, for example.
Absolutely.
If you see what I mean, it's sort of the same but different.
Of course. Yeah, of course. That you're having to adjust to the areas that are kind of critically important. Again, dating in India, dating in China is very different to the way that it happens in this side of the world. And I also wanted to highlight the marketing services is something that a lot of the digital pivot version of many event organizers, they are like leaning towards kind of the digital marketing services. So helping their sponsors create campaigns, create engagement opportunities, even though outside the event or outside even digital publishing, because they don't have it, but it seems to be like a growing sector. And I was going to ask you that you guys are very close to your audience. You guys are very close to your sponsors. Have they been asking for something different than what you guys have already been providing before? I mean, has that changed in any way?
One of the things that people asked for a little while ago, which to be honest I hadn't thought of, was an industry WhatsApp group. So right. we created that, and an industry signal group. So each day we put our content on the WhatsApp group, and we've got hundreds and hundreds of people that joined it. We put it on the website, and everyone just joined. And then so we pop our content out on WhatsApp, and everyone looks at WhatsApp, don't they, when you get a message? So that's really good to give people the headlines and give them links. And then it evolved because you don't want, if you're on I don't know what it's like with your friends, if you're on a group with 10 and someone messages it's a nightmare. you got 50 messages, but you can never catch up. So it's very much a channel where what we've done is we just post our content. We don't let everyone interact and go backwards and forwards. And again, that came as a request from our community. And that's been great. And of course, it's very easy to monitor, because you know what people are clicking on links, and you can see if people are joining your WhatsApp group or leaving it. And we just keep getting more and more people join. So having created the WhatsApp group for the industry, that's been great. Yeah,
because I think, again, the other question that came through was, okay, you guys are, again, in our definition, in our world, like what we call the top of the funnel community. If there was any ideas or thoughts of creating micro communities and monetizing those in a slightly different way, or like subscription model. And I guess you've obviously answered one of that question is, again, so the WhatsApp groups, obviously there's a limit into how many people can be in a WhatsApp group anyways. And so now so initially was open, now you've flipped it back to being more, I guess, a broadcast channel to reach your audiences. So it's not a place where the community itself interacts among each other.
No, it's not. And we've thought of that. We've thought of Slack groups, and we've thought of these sorts of things. But I think our role is to curate and source and communicate the news to the industry. What's going on? Let's tell them what's important, what big stuff's happening globally in the online dating market, and then provide events to bring people together for networking, to meet people face to face, and to learn from the CEOs in the industry. And that's our core competence. That's what we're best at, and that's what we're good. And if people wanted to create their own sub mini thing, that's totally cool with us. But let's do what we can do, and we can control, and we can do that brilliantly, so that people have the best experience of global dating insights.
Essentially focus on your strengths, because I think there's also that sometimes, like, what people see around their industry is like, okay, so communities is the thing, so now the trend is towards micro communities. Let's just set up a micro community. But I also like to reiterate to many people out there that sometimes that's not necessarily valid. Why? Because you probably don't have the resources, or you don't have the necessarily capacity to manage that. And if you're doing very well in very different stages within your organization and within that open community, so be it, and then focus on your strengths. And then there's also a way of participating with other external parties. And there's a question that I have for you was, do you promote, you mentioned that your events get sold out, or that you basically you reach your capacity. Do you purposely keep it at a certain level? Is there any reason why they don't grow further? Because you obviously, one of the kind of main ideas, okay, so if you run out one or two previous years, why don't you get a bigger venue? Why don't you kind of expand that? And what are your thoughts on that?
So, having been in PR for 20 years or so, I've been to a lot of conferences and a lot of events, as you can imagine. And I always like most, as well as good content and learning, it's the meeting people and it's the networking. Now, with our Wednesday night party, Thursday conference, and Thursday night party, you can get around 150, 200 people pretty easily, and you'll get to meet speakers on the Thursday and bump into people Wednesday, and you can kind of get around everyone, and I really like that. I think when things get bigger and bigger, it makes it more difficult, and it just gets tricky, and then everything's a bit more difficult in terms of quality of service, of the best lunches and the best venues, and prices go up and all these sorts of things. And so we've kind of taken the decision that 150, 200 at a push is kind of our sweet spot. That's our limit. We can sell tickets to that at that level well. It's not particularly difficult to sell them. There's a demand, and there's that value of networking and interaction and relationship. And you don't walk into our Wednesday night, you might fly into Singapore or LA or New York or London, you go to the free bar, you go to the party the night before, and you don't walk in there and think, oh my God, there's 1,000 people, where do I start? You walk in and you go, actually, I know some people already, there's some new faces. So that's our approach. I'm sure people may differ in opinion though.
No, well, the interesting trend that we're seeing with communities that are, I'd say, truly loved by the members, and communities that and entrepreneurs that are really placing a lot of importance in their audience. There is a commonality where they want to keep the numbers at a level that they are able to control them, and from that control just means able for them to guarantee that their sponsors are meeting the right kind of individuals, that the sponsors are having the right sort of conversations operationally, that they can manage all that interaction, that the delegates and attendees are also able to, again, understand and get to create that level of intimacy within the events that they organize, because then that's kind of when people are left the event excited, raving about it, and feeling that they've actually done a lot of business with people.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there. I think if I think of some of our suppliers that might do payment processing or monetization solutions or fraud solutions, they don't want to talk to 3,000 people. They want to talk to 5 people who are head of revenue management at dating brands. So I think if what's that phrase, as your circle shrinks, your net worth grows, or whatever it is, I think a smaller number of quality people benefits everyone, is my opinion.
Yeah, and then that's kind of why the reason why, like, all these micro communities, sometimes they will happen. And the argument for a micro community is, okay, well, someone attended your event, these 150 people or 200 people met, interacted, engaged. What happens then? Are you as a business going to leave them, I guess, floating, hanging, or how else are you going to allow or facilitate a way to interact? And then again, there's kind of very different ways. We already talked about that already. Now, I think, Simon, what if you were going to do this again in current day circumstances? Probably there would be already an equivalent global dating insight somewhere. Someone would have done it in the last 8 years. What would you have done differently if you were going to build this again, if that PR person came? And I guess the premise was there is that provider, but that provider is not great. So anything you would do differently?
That's a great question. What would I do differently? I guess I'd probably try and embrace new technologies quicker, whether it's the podcasts or the virtual events we do or anything like that. I think I'd probably try and be on those a bit quicker. Dating companies are essentially technology businesses at the end of the day, so they're very technically forward thinking. So I think I'd probably try and do that. What else? I think that would be my main one. I might also hire someone else to help with it, because
Right.
It's quite a lot going on at the best of times. But they'd probably be my couple of big things.
I see. So Simon, just a quick question as well. Now that we're kind of nearing the end, are you splitting a lot of your time? Where are you splitting your CEO, your brain cells time between jargon and GDI?
Well, probably about 80 to 90% of my time is on jargon PR. That's because it's a lot bigger business. GDI, probably 10 to 15, 10 to 20% of my time is how I would categorize. And
it's already been, it already has certain momentum. It's already kind of going in, and I think that's kind of where it grows. And I think that's very exciting, Simon. And I think we've had like 3 questions which already we've answered through the conversation. So I really do appreciate your time, Simon. It's very interesting. I just want to congratulate you for what you've done, what you've built. And I really hope that this is an inspiring story for any event organizer out there that is kind of looking at adding additional value to the cyclical aspect of events, or the cyclical aspect of virtual events, and how you can create a 365 communication touch point with your audience. I think, Simon, this is a very good example, and thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing all this. Thank you very much.
You're absolutely welcome. Thank you for having me. And there's good days and bad days with all of this, but as we always say here, tough times don't last forever. Tough people do. So keep going. build a great platform, and you'll get there.